Okay, good morning. I have I had on the phone with me, I'm sorry. I have Ethan Henderson, who's CEO of AMS Energy. I also have Jonathan Freeling on the line. And I want to thank you for taking a moment to kind of present about your product and service. I'm excited about this. I'm like, I've told you in the past, I've probably done about 65 ground up construction projects on convenience stores and maybe another half a dozen or so on tunnel washes and stuff. But I'm excited to have you guys on to talk about your I want to say your self-contained convenience store and fueling centers. So why don't you go ahead and tell me a little bit about your company and how you guys got started and where you see the biggest fit for this.
Well, thank you, Harold, for the introduction, and thank you for having us on the show. I appreciate you taking the time to learn more about our product and bring up the idea of doing this. I think it's important to get the awareness out there of what we're doing at AMS. And if I could put that simply, we are re-envisioning the way that fuel is done in the United States. And I emphasize United States because we've done this and we've seen this play out internationally. And it was just a happen of circumstance that we didn't have the ability to do this domestically, nor was anybody willing to take the risk. Because we're creatures of habit. Everybody, when we go to get gas today, we go to a gas station, and the tanks are below ground, and they're out of sight, and they're out of mind. But the reality is, they shouldn't be out of mind. That over 90% of underground storage tanks are leaking, dating as far back as a century, is concerning. And we think that fuel needs to change. And the way we envision fuel changing is let's take it out of the ground where we can't see it, and we're relying on plus and minuses with an auditing system to tell us whether or not we have an issue. Let's take it all out of the ground. Let's put it above ground in a safer alternative that is more economically and environmentally conscious. And that led to AMS's creation of the PAGs, portable above ground gas stations, which subsequently led to C-PAGs and a few other options too. We really pride ourselves on being the economic and environmentally superior solution for retail fuel industry.
So, where do you see this being the biggest fit?
Great question. Jonathan, would you like to jump on that one?
I couldn't follow fully. Where do you see this being the
fitting in the best?
Sure. So we see our systems used essentially in a variety of different settings. Our core focus currently is addressing what are known as fuel deserts. There are tens of thousands of them in the United States, specifically in rural America. Imagine a town like Allentown, New York. Used to be steel factories there, or there's hundreds of other cities that are similar where it used to be large industrial towns. The factory shut down. The factory was employing a good chunk of the people living in that community. And next thing you know, the local grocery store closes, the school closes, and the kids need to go to a school in the next district. And then the last thing left you usually have is a Dollar General and a gas station. And something about gas stations, which most people don't know unless you're in the industry, is every 20 years your underground plumbing, your pipes, and get inspected by the EPA. Usually when those inspections happen, over 90% of the time, there are leaks that are found due to corrosion and other things from the pipes as they're underground for 20 plus years. Once this happens, you need to do what is called remediation. The average remediation project in the United States as of 2020 for a traditional retail fuel station was $243,000. That's obviously a very expensive endeavor, whether you're an independent operator or a large company. That's a significant expense, and a lot of times that causes a mom-and-pop gas station saying, hey, we can't afford this, we're just going to shut down, whether that's filing for bankruptcy or ceasing operations. So because of this, we've noticed that rural America has been dealing with this issue. It's really almost a tragedy, and what people are doing now is having to drive 20, 30 minutes, even more for gas, and we're here to help that issue. What we're trying to do is offer an environmental, economic, friendly model for fuel, helping out communities, providing them with fresh grocery and products, and essentially just making life more convenient. Why travel for fuel 20, 30 minutes if you could have one in your community at a fraction of the cost of a traditional underground gas station?
You know, and to piggyback that, Jonathan makes a lot of great points. The reality is the squeeze and the pressure that we've been put into by the rise in inflation, and many other characteristics have made the sustainable life in rural America much more difficult to ride with. And we see fuel as a piece of a community. We don't know where fuel is going. It could be EV, it could be CNG, it could be 10 years, it could be 20 years. But the reality is today the consumers need petroleum-based products. And unfortunately, there's a large swath of this country that doesn't have easy enough access to it. We have the alternative. And it fits perfectly into that mentality that we have, which is we are the bridge to wherever fuel is going. It may be an alternative, but at least if we store our product safely and efficiently above ground, in the event that it is time to transition to whatever our next product is, we can actually remove our system with very little impact to the environment and put in the next best thing.
You know, I wanted to add two more things to this, especially if you have to have any type of cleanup. And cleanups happen from three different things. They either happen from a leak, and the leak could be from the tanker truck, the leak could be from an underground storage tank, the leak could be from the island that the pumps are on. You know, the leaks, and the spills obviously would come from a tanker truck or somebody that's a drive off and they pulled the dispenser. I mean, they do have these breakaway hoses. You know, they got the shut-off valves and stuff like that. So it is better than what it used to be. And the other thing is if you have migration from another site, which you might not ever have that happen. There's not a ton of them that happen, but they do happen. And by the way, I would tell everybody on this site, regardless if a lender requires it or not, I would always get yourself a phase one. And the reason for that being is so that you haven't, it's called a innocent landowner defense. You don't want to get stuck for somebody else's problem that they had, because you will be on the hook for it. But the two things I wanted to refer to is, number one, if you ever have to have a cleanup on your site, you send an appraiser out there, your site's not worth any more money. I mean, it's not. It just has a new tank, but they don't, you know, your site's not worth another $300,000 because they put a new Xerxes tanks in the ground. And the other thing I wanted to say is, you could put out a site and say, or you can put out a sign and say, hey, we have new underground storage tanks. How many more customers you think that's going to get you? Like none. So go ahead. Sorry to interrupt you, but I thought it was important I mentioned that.
No, Harold, those are great points to be making. And that's again, to your point about the underground storage tank. And, you know, if a site puts a new one of those in, two things don't happen. One, there isn't really an increased valuation on the property, because odds are we had to do some cleanup while that underground tank was being replaced. Even if the underground cleanup's been done, there's a stigma that follows these old gas station properties, that they're dirty, that they're contaminated. Even if you have clean phase ones, they are scrutinized with such peril that it's led to a fear about restarting a lot of those locations.
Well, it also keeps a lot of banks from lending on older properties, and the banking industry, to me, having done over $1 billion of these things, they're very ignorant and they don't want to learn. You know, they'd rather do an easy apartment loan.
I will agree that there is a knowledge that they don't have on what is available with some of these sites post cleanup or even after installation of newer equipment. But I understand where that fear comes from.
Oh, sure.
From lenders.
But here's the problem.
I think we all understand. And the reality is, we as industry people understand the importance of clean, sustainable systems, whether it's underground or above ground. We are not anti-underground storage tanks.
Sure.
It's just we know the economic and the science behind what we do above ground allows us to be a safer alternative.
Sure.
By all means, the underground storage tank market has gotten significantly safer and better than it ever has.
Yeah.
Year over year, we continue to make more advancements that are pushing the boundaries of what we consider acceptable fuel. That we continue to become safer and safer, but you can't see it. You can't see it below ground, and it's a concern. So that's why we focus so much in AMS on the education. It's educating AMS every time we look at a new site. We educate ourselves, not just on that exact property, but the community we're there to serve. We're also going to educate that community on why we intend to service them a little bit differently. And that conversation ultimately leads to a deep conversation with the regulators who, unfortunately or fortunately, haven't really been exposed to this type of technology yet. It's our job to make sure that they have all the information so that when they make a decision, they're making it from an educated position and not one based in fear or lack of knowledge.
Yeah, and that's, you mentioned lack of knowledge. Lack of knowledge or incorrect knowledge is the same
Correct.
thing. So,
Correct. It's unfortunate today, Harold, that there are still states in the United States that are referencing codes that are over 30 years old
yeah,
as being the most current way of thinking about things. It's not. We adopt new code, usually every 2 years.
right,
Because there's been 15 new renditions of that code potentially if it's 30 years old.
right.
It's just not the right way to think about it. Science moves quickly, and so does safety. And if you are relying on something from 1991 to tell you what is right and what is wrong, then you are just turning a blind eye to what has really been done on a technological standpoint, at an accelerated standpoint, like absolutely has never been done before.
Let's talk a little bit about the elephant in the room, because most of these people that are listening to this, some of them, I can just hear it going like, okay, sounds good. How much? How much? Because a lot of the people that are going to be watching this video are probably going to have looked up construction, gas station construction, and that's kind of what they're tuned in on. And I would imagine that that's probably your greatest selling point. And if it's not, then let me know also. But how much could you, and I'm not going to hold you to this, but what would you guesstimate people could save? I mean, we already know that the average convenience store being constructed is 3,500 square feet right now. You don't need that in most of the country. That's just what it happens to be right now. The standard for a convenience store in the 80s was probably somewhere between 1,000 and 1,500 square feet with a huge canopy over the top of a small building. So what are people looking to save on a project, not only in cost, but time to get that up and going?
That is the right question to be asking, because it's not just about cost. Sometimes we have to think about the indirect things that will affect cost, right? That's downtime. I can put one of my systems on the ground in a parking lot within a very short period of time, barring approval times, barring time meeting with municipalities. It takes me 12 to 14 weeks to manufacture a system, getting on site for an installation. And that installation is going to take no more than 48 hours, so long as the land has been prepped appropriately, new concrete pad, and the power being pulled over to it. No one else can do that.
Right.
The other thing that we do very differently is our approvals. Again, I said it earlier that we focus on the education first and foremost, because every time, unfortunately, when we're talking to regulators, especially for the first time, they have no prior knowledge of how these things will work. And out of an abundance of caution and respect for the communities that they serve, they are reluctant until they have all the information. We are very proud of the fact that by way of educating and working with these regulators and the communities of which they serve, we have 100% approval rating on our gas stations. In other words, Harold, if you give me an address, 123 Main Street, I want to put a gas station here. And we take a look at it and say, Harold, we've looked at it. We've looked at the code. We've looked at the rules. Looked at the site from an ergonomics and operations standpoint as well. And we think you have a good site. If we tell you you have a green light, we have 100% approval rating on getting that done. Petroleum industry today averages about 50%. We are getting things done in communities that many, many others have tried and failed, and we come in and we get it approved on the first crack. I'm not here to brag about that, but what that tells me is there's a different way to do The very thing that fear is based upon. We don't want to contaminate the water. We don't want to contaminate the soil. We don't want to make any long-term effects that are going to hurt our children in the future. Well, let's do it respectfully. Let's do it correctly. Let's respect the fact that change is okay. Let's look at it.
Do you you have, I don't know if I want to say 2 or 3 basic models. I'll just say 2 because the other one looks to be, I don't know much about it, but you got the PAGs and the C-PAGs. Can you do a comparison contrast of those 2?
Yeah, Jonathan, go for it.
Well, I mean, you explain what the difference.
Okay. So for us, we started cutting our teeth in the world of AMS with PAGs, portable above ground gas stations. They're 10 to 12,000 gallons, can be less. They don't go more than 12,000 gallons per container for the storage and disbursement of a retail gasoline product. That's where AMS started, was with that idea. The macro issue we deal with in the retail fuel market today is that it's not just expensive to do gas, it's also expensive to do convenience. It's really hard. There's a reason that so many operators are failing today. The prices are volatile, both wholesale and retail, and it becomes difficult to manage that. You couple that with the fact that the average gas station today is somewhere between $4 and $6 million bill. And the economics make it really difficult to take that position of risk.
Yeah.
That's where our C-PAG came from. Our C-PAG is a convenience portable above ground gas station, whereby there's a 1,200 square foot convenience store area flanked by 2 10 or 12,000 gallon containers that carry our product. And that really allows us to do things differently because from an installation to operation standpoint, we can put C-PAGs on the ground for less than $1 million. Now, suddenly you start having that conversation about some of those rural markets where the economics weren't justified, and suddenly you decrease the cost by 75%. You've now opened the door to have a conversation about whether or not we have a sustainable model and method within those communities. So the C-PAG allows us to put a hot kitchen in, store shelving, cooler space, multiple fuel products, operating just like normal convenience stores are today, but at 25% of the cost of a traditional gas station today.
And that excites me.
That's really something different. And it's so different that from a regulation standpoint, we've done these internationally. We've been a part of these internationally for years. And the standard is above ground. In almost every other country, the standard is above ground.
See, now that's good to know. I didn't know that.
Yeah. So when we look at our C-PAG and the introduction, we never put anything to market that we don't test ourselves first, Harold. I refuse to do it. It is one of the biggest things that we stand up behind at AMS. I will not put something in someone else's hands that I haven't tested myself. So we decided to do the first C-PAG ourselves in New York. The reality is, if you read the code, there is zero reference to what we're doing. There's zero documentation that says this is how you should be doing it today. There's also nothing in there that says you shouldn't be doing it this way. But that's the level of change that we are looking to institute here within the retail fueling market. You can't continue to do things with baby steps. Change is good. And I love that the fuel industry has seen massive amounts of change over the last 10 to 15 years specifically. How we're doing the C-PAG is so revolutionary that there aren't even really rules to truly define how it is that we are able to do this, which is why I lean so heavily on our manufacturing side. We have hundreds of employees. We have multiple engineers who have scrutinized over every regulation you can imagine to make sure the product that we are manufacturing and taking to put in your town is going to meet and exceed the rules that are established today. And we look at them every time. We don't just treat this as one shoe is going to fit them all. Every site's unique. We know that, which is why we don't manufacture anything right up until we have the approval in hand. Because every community is different. Every community has specific needs. And we cannot try to put a square peg in a round hole, if you know what I mean, Harold. We have to respect the fact that every site is different.
Sure.
That's what makes AMS different. You know, our stores are going to look similar, sure. Our fuel cells will look similar, yeah. But they're not. They are truly cater to the community that they're there to serve.
Question. Actually, I'm confusing myself with two separate questions. Number one, I noticed in the photo, some of them look like they've got graphic wraps on them. Some of them look plain. Let's say that I wanted to put in a Shell station somewhere in Mississippi. Could you guys graphic wrap any of these things to reflect a particular brand? Because that's usually the whole branding part of a transaction can be rather pricey, and then they think they're doing you a favor by putting wraps on the canopies and the fascia and the signage and stuff like that. I mean, you can have hundreds of thousands of dollars just for imaging.
It can be good and bad. The operations with the dual jobbers, it can be good and bad. It's not to say that jobbers are bad or unbranded are bad.
Right.
Every site has to be interpreted uniquely, and unfortunately, the way we have been shifting the last 5 years specifically. Sorry about that. The way we've been shifting things 5 years specifically, it's been the consignment contracts have been getting much more lengthy,
right?
And they've been given much more money up front, initializing these things happening. So you bring up the point. Let's say we have an operator who has a prior arrangement with Shell, like in your example. If Shell is willing to put their product in our tank, we will wrap that with anything that it needs to be. That's why some of that upfront money is being paid by Shell for that consignment deal to begin with,
right?
Is to brand the site appropriately. Do it one of two ways. Simple graphics, odds are we'll paint it. If it's complex, or better service with a vinyl wrap, which is the nice thing about using our rectangular tank. It acts like a low-grade billboard. We're literally right beside the fueling area. So whether it's Shell or it's your own brand, you can put that directly on the side of these systems and allow the consumer to interact, at least visually, with your brand immediately. You're doing it for a lot less money up front.
So this brings up another question, at least came up to my mind. If you have someone that, let's just say they're not UST literate, and they see this thing, and you've got like the little, I don't know what you call them, but they're basically steel posts that come out of the island so that keeps you from hitting it. But you can't guarantee, because you could have a tanker truck come in there and, plow that over.
Sure.
Why shouldn't I worry that this thing could, explode or something?
And I think we've all seen Die Hard. Probably one too many
times. That's the thing
Earl.
that came to my mind was Die Hard.
Yeah, we shoot that gun, and then everybody goes into a 60 frame per second slow walk off as it explodes. Harold, you and I both know gasoline doesn't do that. Doesn't mean you can't get a Blevy situation. Blevies happen. And they happen with above-ground storage tanks. They can also happen with underground storage tanks, I might add.
Sure.
But they're more common with above-ground, which is why we're not just using a die-hard single-wall steel tank that they're shooting and then walking away in slow motion for the theatrical effect of it. We're using UL 2085 tanks, a type of tank that our manufacturer helped write the rule book on with the regulators around the world. They leaned on us to provide insight on how these tanks should be done.
Right.
UL 2085 is the safest version of an above-ground storage tank that we can make in the world today. It is a tank inside of a tank with an interstitial space equal to no less than 110% of the primary or inner tank's volume. So even in the event that the inner tank were to leak, there is actually ample room in the secondary tank for it to leak into. But that interstitial space is filled with a porous type of concrete. Add a thermal protective layer as well as an impact protective layer. And we go above that even more. We actually monitor that interstitial space. So if any fluid ever gets in there, we know about it before it ever gets out of the secondary tank. Now, your point about a fuel truck hitting the side of the system, it's been tested against impact. It's been tested against ballistics. It's been tested against fires. It's been tested many, many ways to ensure that it's going to stand up to the most extreme situation. But we don't just rely on our system to be the safety barrier to defeat all those concerns. The rules and regulations require us to utilize bollards, just like traditional gas stations are today. Most people don't recognize the bollards at traditional gas stations today. but they're in the posts for the canopy. They're in the horseshoe rings that are at the end of the fueling island.
Right.
Those are bollards set in place to prevent vehicular impact. We use the same thing. Our systems are completely surrounded by bollards to provide a secondary means of automotive collision protection. We are taking the rules that say you need to do this once from a protective standpoint. And we're saying anything worth doing once when it comes to safety is worth doing twice.
Right.
We double up our safety features.
You know, one thing I wanted to point out is I think the economic reasoning is going to be the predominant driver of this for a lot of people. And then as they evaluate what other options are out there are options, but not really like yours. Like they might think, well, maybe I should just bring in a modular thing, and the thing is it's not the same, and while it is less expensive, yes, somebody hauls in probably four units and drops it on the ground like they might on an Arco or like they might at a Walmart at one of the Murphy Oil, Murphy USA. You still got a UST. And it's still the same problem. It's less expensive, but it's still the same issue that you're going to be dealing with. And it's kind of like, I think it's an education thing. I mean, there are things 20, 30, 40 years ago that probably made a lot of people squirrely and nervous that are just, they're commonplace today. But
Harold, I want to add this because I think it's important. As we have these conversations with regulators and we have these conversations with municipal people and communities that we're there to service, there's a question of why. Why are you using above-ground tanks? Can't you just do undergrounds better? The reality is we're not the first people to put above-ground tanks for retail use in the United States. We're far from it, actually. There are many above-ground storage tank manufacturers in the United States. What separates AMS from those others that are doing above-ground as an economic and environmentally superior product is that anyone else is utilizing a standby tank, whereby the tank is away from the dispensing area and we're plumbing underground with cathodic protection to the dispensing area. So we've got those two things separated. Now the unfortunate thing happens because those plumbing lines with cathodic protection are now underground. So we can't see them. So we have to be regulated at least to some variable degree as an underground location because of where those lines are. You may be superior by way of storage, but you are still using what is in our eyes an inferior way of getting the product to the dispenser. And because of that, you're scrutinized twice now. Now you have to, your storage is above ground, your plumbing is underground. Now you have to conform to two different sets of regulations. AMS, let's change it completely. Let's have a holistic system whereby the canopies, the dispensers, the product storage, the plumbing, and even protective qualities are built into one singular engineered product that allows us to drop it on a location and begin fueling operation. No downtime for burying lines, no downtime for laying cathodic protection or concreting a trench for the lines to be dropped into later. Everything on our system is in itself.
Excellent. What are some of the other most frequently asked questions that you guys get?
Jonathan, what do you think? I'm curious, Jonathan, if you want to jump on some of these here.
Yeah, people, I think, so outside of cost, one thing we get asked pretty often is, if I want to order a system today, what is the process? If I'm an entrepreneur, I want to open up a gas station. I know that if I want to open a traditional gas station, it will likely take years. So what is the process for, being a customer, or what we like to call more of a partner with AMS Energy Technologies? And I think walking through that process may be helpful. In short, the answer is about, we'll call it 16 to 24 weeks. But the process is AMS will review your site. We'll conduct what we call a viability assessment. Make sure that according to the rules, we are able to have a retail fuel station in your area that's reviewing, municipal code and all of that fun stuff. Once we deem that your site, we're going to assume it's viable in this case, we'll then usually like to meet, whether that's, virtually or in person with the site owner. We'll send a team member to that site to look around, make sure, whatever we're able to see from images online matches what is in real life. We have never had any major issues from that. Once or twice we did find a well nearby. Of course, you can't have a well right next to a gas station for a variety of different reasons.
Sure.
But out after we complete that process, we will then hire a civil engineer. AMS has, throughout the entire process, from engineering approvals to the POS system you need to dispensers, general contractors, and construction. We have a pretty wide enough cast network throughout the entire country that whatever state you're in, we'll be able to introduce you to partners. Most of our partners are nationwide, so we'll help you get your engineering approvals. Usually takes about a week or two for the engineer to draw up their plans. We'll submit those plans. If there are any town meetings or something that we need to go to, an AMS representative or the site owner will go there, for example, if you need to seek a variance. Once we receive approval from the municipality or town, and we are proud and privileged to have a 100% approval rate thus far in the United States, we will then send you a purchase order. The system will be ordered. It takes a little bit less than 12 weeks for it to be manufactured. We have 3 manufacturing plants throughout the world, one in North America, one in South America, and one in Asia. And that is to, number one, sell our products to customers throughout the world, but also steel prices fluctuate, and we want to ensure that we can get the best price for our customers and partners. Once that system is ordered and complete, it will be shipped to the port. From there, it will go on freight, arrive at the site. We'll then have a crane. Within, I'd call it 3 days, you will have your site up and running, and that includes electric will be ready to be pulled. There's a concrete pad that needs to be laid out. But during the 12 weeks of manufacturing, we do all of the contracting work, and then we have a grand opening, and that is essentially the process. We've done it almost always in less than 4 months, and we're proud of that. It's really beneficial for a variety of reasons. Number one, there's less downtime, so compared to a traditional gas station, you're open faster, which means you're making money faster. And then another benefit of it is because we are not underground, if for some unforeseen reason you need to relocate that fuel cell somewhere else, there is not a significant cost in doing that.
That's excellent. I think I've got most of what I need to have on this, because I'm going to have your contact info at the bottom in the description on the video, where they can contact you directly to ask you additional questions. I appreciate you being on. I'm pretty excited about this. I'm pretty excited about getting the word out for this and hopefully stimulating traffic for both of us. And again, thanks so much for being on the call. I really appreciate it.
Harold, I appreciate your time, Harold. What you're doing and trying to spread awareness of the fueling industry and how these things actually work together. A lot of people don't think about it today. When we need fuel, it's a commodity in which when you need it, you're going to buy it. The price, although we may not like how high it is per gallon, when you need it, you have to get it. And most people don't understand that there are things that we can do as a society and as an operator to make life easier for the consumer, whether it's financial or environmentally. We can make a difference, and that's our goal here at AMS, is to work with people, not just get units out the door. It's important to work with our communities.
Right. I get it. Well, thanks again. Thanks for making yourself available.
Thank you, Harold. You have a great rest of your day.
All right. Take care.
Thanks. Bye.